Recording in progress. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see you. And thanks for signing up for our second hour of power. I'm super excited to have these rolling and very excited to have Corey with us today. I think I know most everybody, so I don't need to introduce myself, but I'm going to let Corey do your own introductions and we can take it away.
Yeah, you bet. My name's Dr. Corey DuPont. I'm a physical therapist, and I own my own practice called DuPont Wellness Mobile Physical Therapy. So you're actually catching me, if you can tell, from my office, which is my vehicle. So I just finished off a visit, seeing a client and working my way back home. And I bring physical therapy to where people are at, whether it's at home, at work, at the gym, on the trail when the mud conditions allow us to be out there, for sure. So, and I've have some partnerships, some very nice partnerships, like with Michelle. I've worked with Michelle before, in the triathlon and running world. I'd like to consider myself a runner by, in my history. Something that I had discovered not until college, that, hey, I have the ability to run. And then from there, I've been practicing physical therapy for about 15 years, most of that here in the Boise area, a good combination of outpatient orthopedics, injury recovery, work injury recovery, and even home health, where I'm working more with the geriatric population. They just getting out of hospital, out of surgeries. And what I've done is I mashed it all together into one practice where I'm doing outpatient orthopedics, but in a mobile setting, out seeing people. So I do currently actually have contracts in place where I serve some of the home health agencies in the area. So I'm seeing people that are young, like under 10 years age. And my oldest gal just a couple weeks ago was 106. So, right, that's quite an accomplishment.
You say 106?
106.
Oh,
yes.
My goodness, that's amazing.
So I always like to ask those individuals, what their secret is to longevity. And sometimes you get these off the wall answers of, I've been drinking seven what was her drink of choice? Dr. Pepper's a day. No, you're just lucky. But there are some key things that, looking at longevity and what these folks had done. And number one is staying active and relatively stress-free is actually a big thing. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm here to answer some questions and see if I can get everybody kind of on the right track to health and wellness.
So I just want to add in there too, Corey. I've known Corey for at least 15 years. Yeah.
15 years, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. When you were at Therapeutic Associates, was that like you were just kind of starting in, right?
I think we started that triathlon group when I was an intern.
And okay, yeah.
Yes, and then that was my first job as a physical therapist back in 2008 with Matt Booth at Therapeutic Associates.
Yeah, that's right. You were an intern. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No,
back at the Park Center Mall.
That was
when it was a mall.
That was back when we actually had Boise 70.3. We actually had some triathlons around here. So
right.
All long gone. So I don't however you guys would like to do this, I can read off the questions, or if you would like to ask your own questions, I think that would actually be better yet. So whoever, we can just like be super casual. Whoever wants to just jump in and ask the question that they had, great, and then I'll start some discussion. So go for it if anybody wants to. If nobody wants to, then I'll start running them down. So
well, let's start with the one question I had about compression sleeves for calves. whether they're beneficial while you're running, or is it better just after you're running or exercising, or both?
Yeah. So according to the research that I have seen, it does improve your circulation, especially your venous return, the return of the blood going back to the lungs and to the heart, gathering the oxygen. So that's where that seems to help improve performance. But I find that finding that improvement in performance doesn't really come into play unless we're really looking at nuances. But it can especially speed recovery. So I think ideally wearing them while exercising and then a short bit afterwards what help with the shortening the recovery time after activity.
Well, how much is a short bit? I've seen some places where they say you wear them to bed, you wear them overnight. Is that too much?
I find that comes down to individual preference. For me, it's too much. Um, I have worn some in the past, and I honestly didn't see much of a difference myself. But I find that wearing it for maybe an hour afterwards might be adequate. One thing I always like to tell people is that our bodies are very good at doing what it's designed to do, everything from healing to recovery. And as long as we're kind of playing to its strengths, it will help us out. And there's so many different things that come into recovery and performance as well. Everything from your hydration to your nutrition to the intensity of the workout. Yep. So good on you for having some water. So I find the amount of time afterwards is going to honestly come down to personal preference. A lot of people, and myself included, can't stand them on at night. I got to have them off.
Also, I've seen a lot of runners have the arm sleeves, which look like they're just for warmth. But are they compression sleeves also that do any good, that add anything for your arms?
Yeah, I think you're mostly right in that it's mostly kind of a minimalist way of having cover and protecting yourself from the cold. They have some elasticity to it, but I haven't seen specifically, especially for endurance athletes, compression sleeves for the arms.
Okay.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please do.
As in a question. So helpful during plane flights. That's one of the places that I have heard them to be most helpful. Is that, do you agree with that?
Exactly. And so that's where sometimes I like to use my calf sleeves, compression stockings, is when you're not moving very much. So long car trips, plane rides, especially if you're in coach and you only get this much room for your legs. So again, the compression sleeves improve venous return, blood coming back out of your legs to your lungs and then to your heart, then back out into the body. When we are sitting, when we're standing for long periods of time and not moving, gravity has that effect of pooling blood down into our feet and our ankles. So that's why, if you've ever noticed, I've noticed, especially as the years are passing by, that on a long plane trip, my feet are puffy, my ankles are puffy. And that's just because that's where gravity is accumulating some of that fluids. So yes, a lot of people wear compression stockings, and I do recommend it, especially if you're pregnant, for example, is a good idea if you're going to be doing a long trip or have any other kind of cardiovascular issues. It could be very nice to have that compression to keep the pooling at a minimum.
Nice. Good questions, David. Anything else on yours? On your mind?
I'm going to ask about specific exercises for hip mobility, hip strength, the hip flexors. If you have anything out of the ordinary that you have found that works really well.
Out of the ordinary. See, I like to lean on the more simple, more better. So we can totally get complicated and fancy And those are fun to do. But I find that when we stick true to what our bodies are designed and meant to do and really tap into that, it's the simplest things that you can do. Number one, squats. It's one of the most powerful exercise. It's simple to do. Yeah, there's so many different variations that you can do, all the way to a single leg, backward toe tapping lunges, and really engaging those gluteal muscles. Kind of the key thing with a squat is getting that tush back, really kind of sitting back like you're going to sit into a chair, which helps keep your knees in a good alignment, from keeping your knees behind your toes, because you don't want your knees over your toes. What that does is it increases the torque and the forces produced on your patella, which then jams into the end of your femur. And that can result in all kinds of things, from patellofemoral syndrome, patellar tendonitis, to just excessive compression of the cartilage on the patella on the femur. So really get that tush back. And then a little trick I like to do when you come back up from a squat is get a little tush squeeze at the top, a little added gluteal boost, to get that through. But yeah, focusing on your gluteus maximus, your gluteus medius, and your gluteus minimus. You got three major gluteal muscles, for sure. And the squat is also going to get your quads, your hamstrings are engaged, your calves are engaged, your low back, your core. That's why I like squats in particular. Doesn't matter if they're my 8-year-old or my 108-year-old, I'm having them do a variation of squat.
Okay.
And then for the lateral hip stabilizer, so that's your gluteus medius and your gluteus minimus. That's where you work on exercises that are going out to the side. So channeling your inner Jane Fonda, if you will. We got those VHS tapes that somebody, I know one of you has some. It's your ankle warmers. But doing some side kicks or bands around the ankles, and you're doing side stepping. And the key thing with those two muscles, gluteus medius and gluteus minimus, as the name implies, they're fairly small muscles, not very powerful. Gluteus maximus is a very powerful accelerator for us. But the medius and the minimus are meant to be stabilizers. So to exercise these guys, the optimally is you work out. It's a pretty simple exercise, but you're going to take it to burnout. So it might take you 20 or 30 or 40 repetitions. You go like banded side steps until you feel like they're going to burn right off of your hips. You give them a little rest, and then you burn them out again. And so, whereas the squats, for the gluteus maximus, we're going to maybe do a higher intensity, higher load, maybe even jumps to really get that guy engaged.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So again, can I kind of add, Corey, a little?
Please add away.
Yeah. So the nice thing about squats and lunges and those kind of things is that it is both a mobility and a strengthening exercise at the same time. So that's great. I mean, for those of us that are time crunched, right, and are looking for the fastest way to get at things, and we have minimal amounts of time to do all these different things, if you can find those exercises that are combos. So, and those exercises are great combos, because not only can you work them from a strength component, but you can also work them from a mobility component, which is working that range of motion to open it more dramatically. So that's super helpful. I'm glad you said those two. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And kind of circling back to your question about mobility. So are you talking about gaining some extra flexibility in through the hips?
Yes, I need a lot more flexibility than what I have.
A lot more flexibility. Okay, very good. So there's a couple of different ways. You got, everything from your static stretches, those long holds, to something that's more movement based, but in repeated movements to kind of break through some stiffnesses. I always tell people it's a lot, especially if you're dealing with some arthritis in there, it's a lot like a rusty door hinge. There's a couple of ways we can get it to move a little bit better. One is to spray some WD-40 on it. I can tell you that's not going to get anything but a mess for joints, but repeated motion to a joint will help lubricate the joint and starting to soften up the ligaments around it. So especially with arthritis, our cartilage doesn't have blood supply. So the only way cartilage gets its nutrients is by producing a fluid called synovial fluid from the inside lining of all of your joints, which is stimulated through a repeated motion. So like Michelle was saying, repeated squats, you're going through the full motion to full extension. For hips in particular, I like the butterfly stretch. You know, that's where you're sitting, you got your feet together, knees out. That's usually a common one that kind of motion gets lost with a little bit of arthritis. Knees to chest is a great one. And then kind of the runner's lunge stretch. That's where you're down on one knee, and then the other knee's propped up in front of you, and you're leaning forward, getting a stretch on the front side of your hip of the leg that's in back that you're on the knee on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are kind of three major stretches to do for the hips in particular.
Okay.
So this session kind of relates to something that I was wondering about, like, because you mentioned the squats for the strength. And so like, I know Michelle has loaded, you know, a lot of my workouts have those squats built in for strength. But then what I get kind of confused sometimes is like when my workout is over and I've already done the squats for the strength, in order for injury prevention, like, am I better served by doing more mobility, like doing more like high rep squats, or should I spend more time stretching, or does it just depend on my symptoms? I just wonder, like, how am I best going to, how should I best spend my time? Because usually by the time I'm done with the workout, it's like, I'm in a hurry. Like I only have a few minutes left, you know, and I'm like, do I do mobility? Should I do stretching? I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
Yeah. So again, generally speaking, leaning towards the more simple, more better is you've already worked out. You've already done the major portion that you need to do to keep your body healthy and injury free. So what I find, and I think Michelle had the question posed that I was reading through, the number one key thing for injury prevention outside of staying active is listening to your body. So your body is going to communicate with you on what it wants and what it's concerned about, or vice versa. And so I always teach people to listen for your body whispering to you that, I need you to kind of pay attention, maybe modify how you're doing whatever you're doing, but still keep going. Because there's definitely a difference between discomfort versus pain. And we never want to, you know, exercise into and through pain. Pain means you're doing harm to yourself. I always tell people versus discomfort, it might mean that, that muscle's not quite ready for this activity, or that's a little bit further, especially if it's a discomfort around a joint or a tendon or ligament. Here's where your opportunity is to jump in right away and make a positive impact and keep that from becoming an injury. So I always teach people, when you hear that whisper, that little something that's not quite right, but not really hurting, I always tell people, stop what you're doing, maybe do a 30-second gentle stretch on it, and then try it again. If it's still there, let's modify what you're doing. Maybe change the intensity of it or make that movement smaller. If that takes care of it, you just solve the problem. If that's still not it, let's go do something different. So a different exercise, and then I'm going to come back to it and see if that resolved it. Your body's very good at cleaning things up as long as you're paying attention to it. And then if you have like a little nagging little something, if you can, generally speaking, do a gentle stretch on that little ache or a little tiny strain, 30 seconds. And I tell people to do it once an hour. Within a couple of days, your body's already got it cleaned up. So number
So
one,
yeah, so I mean, when you talk about like listening to your body, I feel like you're right. Like when I'm done with a workout, I feel like lately my body's been saying you need to stretch more your hips, and a lot of those stretches you just gave, like the butterfly, the runner's lunge, some of those, I feel like that's what my body's kind of whispering to me that I need to do for
yes,
stretching. But on the other hand, I also feel like I have a little bit of whisper that my body is saying you're losing your neck mobility. And so do you have a suggestion on something that would help me get my neck mobility? Because I ignore that whisper. I'm ignoring it. I am totally just ignoring it. I'll tell you right now, I'm ignoring it. But I know it's there. And so like if you have any suggestions on neck mobility moves, love to hear that.
yes, definitely. Yes. So I'm going to back up a little bit. When is it best to stretch? According to research, it's always best to stretch after you've already done at least a dynamic warm up or your workout. So the old days, I remember in high school, we'd be out there on the field stretching first, and then we would do our workout. And what they found is that stretching cold actually increases your risk for injury. So that's why Michelle now probably has the dynamic warm-ups, and then you do your exercise. And then at the cool down, it includes some stretches at the end. So with that being said, warm up your body to set yourself up successfully for stretches, which are going to gain you a little bit more mobility, more flexibility. Same thing as it pertains to neck mobility. What I would probably start off with is movements to kind of warm up the joints, get the lubricant going, and then working on some stretches or mobility type of exercises. So for the neck, it's quite simply going to be pumping the joints left and right, nothing fancy, 20 side to side, up and down. And I'm not going to the fullest extent of what my neck can do. After I've warmed it up, then I can work on stretching it off to one side. Not into pain, but yeah, that's kind of the limit. And then I go back and you take it to the limit. You keep playing with those boundaries. But one in particular exercise is very good for neck mobility is what I call the chicken walk. Walk like a chicken. There it is. Or you get a side profile here. You got your chin out and then really retract it back. You got that double chin happening, your chin towards your Adam's apple, and then back and forth. It's the backward motion that's actually going to mobilize the joints all up and down your neck, especially at the lower portion of your neck where we all tend to get most stiff. And it's that repeated motion that breaks through the stiffness. Repeatedly taking that paper clip back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it loosens up. And then eventually it breaks. But we're not going to break your neck. But we want to get through that idea of breaking through that stiffness through repeated movement. So I tell people.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So number of repetitions on this is 20 repetitions or more.
So I really like what you said, because I think one of the reasons why I ignore it is because I think your solution just seems so simple. Like just turning your head side to side or the chicken walk, it just seems so simple. So I'm like, I don't know if that's doing anything, but you said the simpler the better. So it is doing something.
Exactly. And I find this to be a common theme with athletes. It's got to be harder than that. No, it's got to be harder. I'm an athlete. I should be doing something really, really hard. When the reality is, no, it's playing with what your body can do and play with its limits, and it doesn't have to be hard.
Thank you.
I mean, it does take some of the sexy out of it. But yes, if you want, we can come up with some real fancy stuff. But I find that the fancy stuff actually places you at a higher risk for something going wrong.
Okay.
Yep. The KISS principle, right? Keep
Yeah.
it simple.
Yeah. Thank you.
So real quick, Corey, I'm assuming there's a connection since we're talking about neck mobility. I'm assuming there's a connection between scapular mobility and neck mobility. Like as the scapula starts to tighten up in that more forward hunch that a lot of times we get as we age, then that's going to
Right.
hinge your neck, right? So that openness, that upper back mobility is probably equally, or maybe not equally, I don't know. Would that be considered an important part too to that?
Definitely, for sure. So, I'm going to back way up. Embryonically speaking, we develop in the womb in the fetal position. You know, our arms curled in, our knees up, and our spines curled forward. So our spines actually start out as a C, but as we come out, we straighten that up, and it becomes kind of this S curve, which is like a leaf spring that absorbs, you know, shock when we're doing things upright. Gravity is never going to give up. She's always going to be pulling you down, and gravity's always going to, I don't know why I say she, but it's always going to be pulling and wanting to bring you back into that fetal position, that default position we developed in. And so we're always having to fight against it our entire life. Where we get into trouble, where we see it a lot now in these days, is how much time do we spend right here on a laptop? Like, I do this a lot. I've got my laptop here and I'm documenting, and I'm just like this, or sitting in bed and I've got my book or what have you. So we do spend a lot of time actually going forward, and we do want to fight against that. Now, there's a couple things with posture. I've never been a big fan of the idea where people say, imagine that there's a string on the top of your head and you're pulling your body straight. It always felt awkward to me. What I tell people is you want to lift with your sternum. Your sternum gets lifted. That brings your chin down, your head back, and it realigns your shoulders back. Now, onto the shoulder blades. Yep. And you don't have to be military. There's nothing saying about that.
They all sit up straighter.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody sits up straighter. But coming to your shoulder blades are designed to be the foundation for your arm. There's only one bony attachment that your entire arm attaches to the rest of your skeleton, and it's right here at your collarbone, at your sternum. This joint is this big. That's the only bony attachment your entire arm has to the rest of your skeleton. So your shoulder blades are actually held in place by muscles. And those muscles are designed to be stabilizing so that your arm can function. Now, if your posture is starting to round and these muscles are starting to stretch out and around, now we set ourselves up for rotator cuff impingement and biceps tendonitis up here at the shoulder, actually, AC joint issues, things like that. So posture is going to help keep your shoulder blades in good alignment, and then toning up the muscles that attach your shoulder blade to your spine is always going to be a great idea. So those are things that are, shoulder retractions. I always tell people, for every repetition that you're doing for your chest, chest presses, push ups, flies, you do a repetition going the opposite. So pull backs, reverse flies, working your trapezius, lat pull downs, all these things, because your back needs to balance your chest. Our chest is very powerful. I get a kick out of my teenage boys because they're very good at working the chest and their biceps. and they forget about everything else. And then they end up, walking around like this. And their shoulder blade muscles, their rhomboids, the trapezius, levator scapula are all very weak. So we do want to use those scapular muscles for the function of our entire upper body chain.
Nice. Good stuff. Since we're on mobility, Laura, I think you had some mobility questions too. Did we get your questions answered, or do you have additional questions?
So I was just asking what your go-to exercises, like the things we absolutely should not skip. And so clearly you think squats, like that's definitely a go-to, but any of those really we should not skip kind of exercises.
So for lower body, it's squats. If there's one exercise you do, make it squats. It's going to get the most results with even without the resistance. You don't have to have heavy weights. Like yesterday, I was mopping the floor and I was doing lunges with each time I went forward. So I was just trying to get something in during the day because I had a really busy day. So I was lunging all the way through the house while I was cleaning the floor. And really a lunge is just a single leg squat.
Do you put deadlifts into that same category, Corey? As
I think
deadlifts considered squats also in your book or not?
In essence, yes, because you're engaging the most amount of muscles. So that's what I like about squats and deadlifts, push-ups, because we're engaging so many muscles all at once versus doing a biceps curl. I'm just working my one biceps. But if I'm doing a lat pull down, I'm engaging biceps, my shoulder blade muscles, and my core. Push-ups, you're engaging, of course, the triceps, the traps, you're stabilizing through your scapulae, your anterior core, your abdominal muscles have to be engaged. And then you have your quads, your glutes are keeping you into an erect posture, just horizontally. That's why I like push-ups. So, gosh, who was the famous guy who really got, America into exercising? I'm imagining
Jack
black and
LaLanne.
white.
Jack LaLanne. Yes. The jumping jack, named after him.
Yeah, right. Calisthenics. Keeping it fairly basic. Squats and push-ups. If you can do squats and push-ups, you're gonna be all right. If you want to combine them and add a little intensity, now you're doing burpees.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Does that help, Laura? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you
So
doing
when
squats and push-ups currently?
Am I?
Yeah.
Not enough. Definitely not enough.
See, when I'm crunched on time, I do burpees because I can do 3 or 4 sets of fairly high intense sessions of burpees, and I'm less than 10 minutes into it, and I just work my whole body. Yep.
And you got some cardio.
And yeah, and then I got the added benefit of basically a HIIT workout, that cardiovascular, getting that boost of energy, and yeah.
Exactly. Melissa, do you wanna ask your question?
Yes. I'm recently recovering from a calf muscle strain, and just wondering, I've been doing all the different PT, different stuff, but I'm also a few weeks into marathon training of what I'm supposed to be doing, and wondering how far I can push it and what I need to watch for as far as to not cause injury, because I do have a tendency to over push things and to get back a little bit early.
So there's a couple of things that kind of go into that. First and foremost is, like I said earlier, listening to your body. as a physical therapist, the first things I ask is, why did you sustain a calf injury? What was it? Was it a direct injury, like somebody hit you with a baseball bat from behind? Or, yeah, that seems a little violent. Or was it, it happened while I was on a run and I was 3 miles into it? Because those have two different kind of pathways, if you will.
For my specific thing, it was hill sprints and being a little bit too competitive with my good friends. So
there we go. Yeah. So powering up a hill, if you will, right? Your calf is a very powerful propeller. It's designed, it can handle a lot of weight. That Achilles tendon is super thick. So it's almost, I think it's about your index finger or larger. It takes a lot of force right through that. So some things I'd be careful about is getting too premature into power activities. So like jumping, but running should be all right. I'd keep it fairly well on the level to begin with, kind of condition it. But definitely be doing some calf stretches throughout the day. So a gentle 30-second calf stretch once an hour. Within 2 weeks, it should be cleaned up. Especially if you know you didn't seriously injure it. It's just kind of strained.
Well, this one's I injured it over Christmas, and I'm still not back to full running, but I'm starting to get to the point where it's not bothering me too much. So
okay,
probably not sore for a couple days after.
Right. And again, our bodies are very good at healing things up, especially when we give it the right conditions. So I would say 30-second calf stretch once an hour, you're going to see some pretty significant changes. If you're not seeing complete changes within 2 weeks, maybe talking to a physical therapist, and maybe there's something going on the tissue level that can be ironed out, in essence.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. And that's kind of a good segue as well. When is it appropriate to see a physical therapist if things aren't going the way you expected? So the body does heal in predictable patterns when it comes to sports type of injuries, like let's say just a basic strain of a hamstring or a calf, or you roll your ankle when you sprained a mild sprain of the ankle. As long as you're staying relatively active, still doing gentle stretches on it once an hour, 30 seconds, by the end of the first week, it should be noticeably getting better. And by the end of the second week, it should be all the way better, if not very close. As soon as you recognize that it's not following this pattern, the sooner you can have a physical therapist take a look at it and do some treatments for it. It takes considerably fewer visits to get you back out on there. And so I've seen athletes less than 24 hours from a major ankle sprain, and I can get them walking out the clinic door. And within a couple of weeks, they're back to running. So the faster you can get it in, the less work it takes to overcome it, and then you're back at it.
I would totally second that, Corey.
I was gonna say, I believe Michelle has some experience that she could lean on as well.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's like I've gotten to the point where it's like if anything hurts the next day, like it shouldn't have hurt the next day, but it does. It's like I go. It's like just get it treated. Oftentimes it can be one and done. And that's so nice. Rather than waiting and then you've got weeks that have gone by and you can't do stuff and it just takes longer. So I want you guys to have punch cards so I could just go into my little punch card and be like, okay, this is punch number 6.
Exactly.
So do you have modalities that you particularly think are helpful for endurance athletes that you really like, Corey?
Modalities as in like heat versus cold, or
like I don't know, dry needling, or I don't know what you're using now, techniques. But what things that you particularly think are really effective? Yeah,
really effective. So I am by trade a manual therapist. So these are my tools right here. in particular my thumb. Some people may have met my thumb. So that's always my go-to, is because I can feel what's going on. It's very intuitive as well, because your body's communicating with me, and I can quickly identify tissue dysfunction or what's called fascial distortions and get those ironed out very quickly. For me, that's the fastest results that I see, is using my hands. Some other techniques I use, which have some links to ancient Chinese medicine. So I do dry needling, which is good at helping to reset muscle groups and to get them to function better. So that's more of a kind of a retraining sort of thing. If we have a muscular imbalance, we can use the needles to get things to settle down that way. I also use
what dry needling is.
Who's heard of it?
Everybody?
Very similar to acupuncture in the sense that I'm using basically the same needles. However, an acupuncturist is working towards improving your chi, the flow of your chi, your energy meridians. Because if your energy meridian gets blocked somewhere, it can manifest as a physical illness or physical dysfunction. As a physical therapist, I'm using the needles to insert into a muscle that's not behaving correctly, to either get a muscle that's overly tonic to let go, or I can actually get it into a muscle that's not activating enough, add some electrical stimulation to it, and get it to wake up, in essence. So that's why we call it in physical therapy functional dry needling, because we're trying to get at the function of muscles. If your chi happens to release, that's just added benefit. And then some other techniques I use, a scraping technique that's called augmented soft tissue mobilization, or instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization, or Graston, or in the Chinese realm, it's called gua sha. And that's a technique that uses a sharper edge of a tool to stimulate a physiologic healing response at the tissue level. I always kind of find it fascinating that these ancient cultures have been doing some of these things forever. And it's just now that our Western science is catching up and explaining why, and now we're more accepting of it. Same with cupping.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, same with cupping. You know, cupping's been around for eons. Some cultures will leave a cup on so long that it draws blood to that area through the skin and then pools into the cup. I'm not going to leave a cup on that long. But we can use a cup to draw blood to the area. That's what leaves all those circular bruises, because all that blood was drawn to that area. And ancient cultures have already known that blood is good for healing. If we can attract blood to your area, basically your life force to the area that needs healed, maybe we can heal that up.
Yeah, I will attest. Dry needling, love. A-stim, do not love. But they both work.
They both do work, and I find that most people do like the needling. It's very rare that people really don't like it or respond to it. Totally agree. The A-stim is a fairly aggressive technique, not pleasant, but it gets aggressive results. Some of the techniques I use with my thumb, not pleasant, but it gets an immediate result.
I would take hands over the scrapey tool.
The scraping, yeah. I think I fall in that. I can't stand A-stim on myself.
Yeah, it's got the nails on the chalkboard feel for me, which I don't like.
But I've met people that are like, oh, that just feels so good. I'm like, really? Okay, let's keep going.
So we have two people who are not here, but I would like to get their questions answered, and I got to go to my little document here on one of them. So one of them was on arthritis, which I know you just did a really nice blog post for me on in my newsletter.
Yes.
And she says it sure seems to come and go. I know if I overdo it, of course it flares up, but sometimes it seems like it just shows up. Are there other things that might trigger it? She's taking osteo, biflex, tart cherries, and turmeric as, I guess, ways to offset it. And then she asked any other suggestions. So that's multiple.
Yes. So arthritis, I'll keep it fairly brief. So arthritis, I always tell people it's, as we age, we wrinkle, and we show that on the outside. You know, we got laugh lines, crow's feet, we got forehead lines. And when you're 100, you're supposed to have more wrinkles than when you were 20. And we also wrinkle on the inside, but we call it arthritis. And it typically shows up around the joints where some of the motions are happening. And arthritis is a normal part of being a human being. However, arthritis, where's my hand here? Arthritis and pain are two separate things. You can have arthritis and have no pain at all. I always like to give an example of a gentleman I had worked with. He walked in the clinic. He was all hunched over, just shuffling along. He was in his 80s, and he sat down on the chair, and I asked him, "So, do you have any arthritis anywhere?" And he says, "Nope." I said, okay. The guy had arthritis all over the place, but what he was trying to say is he doesn't have pain associated with arthritis. So when we are feeling arthritis, it typically shows up as a stiff achiness, especially after a period of time when we have not been moving. So when we wake up in the morning and you get out of bed, stiff achy, a lot of times in your low back, your hips, your knees, maybe the ankles, your neck, shoulders. Those are some of the most common places, because guess what? We really haven't been moving for the last 8 hours. And so once you get moving, it seems to soften up and get a little bit better. And you're actually experiencing what I was talking about earlier, the production of that synovial fluid through the cyclical pumping action of the joint lining itself. So as you're sitting still, your joints get low on oil. And it'll give you a little warning indicator that you're low on oil, just like your car. A little light comes on. But for us as human bodies, we get symptoms. Stiff, achy means that joint is low on oil, and we need to pump in more lubricant. And that's quite literally what you got to do. So if it's your thumb, pumping your thumb to get more, a very common spot to have arthritis in this part of your thumb, to get more lubricant in there. Pumping your knees, pumping your neck, rolling your shoulders, wherever it might be, to get more of that fluid inside. As we age, we don't, things physiologically just kind of slow down, right? One of those things that slows down is the production of that synovial fluid. So, which is why it's easier to become more stiff and achy the older we get. So when you're 100 years old, you're almost always stiff and achy because that fluid production has slowed down enough. But if you can stimulate it, you can actually keep things from being so symptomatic with arthritis. So also with arthritis, which is part of your joints are an encapsulated system. So some things that can irritate arthritis or increase symptoms are anything that causes irritation of the joint itself. So like inflammation and swelling will cause that joint to kind of start to expand, and it starts stretching on the capsule. And that's what we feel, that capsule stretching, that achiness. So if you overdid a certain activity, you cause some swelling, some inflammation, that's what you can be feeling. Especially it's like the day after, like, oh, my joints. Or it could be nutritional. I went heavy on the pizza on Friday, and guess what I felt like on Saturday morning? Puffy all over the place. created some swelling in the joints, and I was a little more stiff and achy. So that's inflammatory. So she's taking, for example, turmeric, which is a natural anti-inflammatory to help out with that. And I'm a big fan of turmeric. I take turmeric myself on a regular basis because it has so many positive physiologic effects besides an anti-inflammatory, and it's non-pharmaceutical. So I like those types of things. And then also for arthritis, people can feel weather changes. How many of you can experience when the weather changes? Yeah,
Yeah.
some of us do. So what
Not
you're
yet.
actually, not yet, just wait. If when what you're experiencing is the change in barometric pressure. So the old barometers, the fluid barometers, they have some fluid and then there's a little bit of air inside. So when the air pressure drops, the air molecules expand, which then pushes the fluid up the little flute. And that's how we know we're in a low pressure system. In a high pressure system, the molecules of the air get compressed, and so the fluid fills back in where that compressed air was. And same thing happens inside of your joints. Low pressure system, your joints start to expand, and that's why we feel low pressure weather systems coming in. So what happens with low pressure weather systems? Wind, rain, clouds, right? Storm coming in. High pressure systems, the joints are compressed, there's more wiggle room, the sun's out, there's just a light breeze. These are the good days. And you could also feel with arthritis, I'm in this camp, of when you start to get sick, you get an immune response. So the immune molecules start to mobilize and you start to feel areas that are more sensitive because your immune cells and your immune molecules actually act as nerve sensitizers. So that's why when you have a flu, everything aches. Your fingernails ache, your hair aches. Your hair shouldn't feel stuff, but it does. And so for me, my number one indicator of getting sick is that my knees and my back start to ache, all three together for no reason. Sure enough, the next morning I've got a sore throat.
Okay, so I thought the whole like weather thing with the joints was like a total like old wives' tale, but apparently it is not.
It is not. It's the expansion and contraction of the joint fluid inside of your own barometers that are every single joint in your body.
That's interesting. Okay, we have about 4 minutes left, you guys. I have one additional question that one of our non-attendees asked, but I'm going to hold that if anybody else has any other questions they want to ask. So you guys get preference because you're here. So anybody have anything else? Okay, then I will ask this last question, which is, it's kind of a broad question, so I'm not exactly sure, Corey, how you're going to respond to this, but anything on reverse aging, and then small steps to improve and how to build them into daily life, which I kind of feel like you sort of addressed that part already, but you can take it away.
Reverse aging, the fountain of youth. The key thing there is seeing if we can basically stimulate human growth hormone. That's basically where you want to think about that. And things that stimulate human growth hormone, exercise. Really is exercise, reducing inflammatory things to your body. So that, includes environmental, dietary, things like that, because that has a negative effect on your body's DNA in essence. But yeah, that is a very broad thing. But generally speaking, things that keep you young, exercise, stress reduction, and good nutrition. Yeah, with the stress, I think that's such a big thing. How many of us have met the old guy that's still smoking his whole life?
Yeah.
But these other people, they're in their 50s with lung cancer, and they started smoking at 16. What I have found is that it's a difference in stress levels. The old guy smokes because he enjoys it. The young guy smoking because he's trying to relieve stress. I gotta have it, right? Two totally different people. Same with drinking. It's the stress that's killing us.
So is sleep considered in the stress reduction category? Is that where you'd put that?
Yes, totally. Good sleep hygiene it is a great way to relieve stress, because you get into those REM cycles, your brain's communicating left and right, integrating the emotional things that happen throughout the day, and rest and rebuilding for sure. So there's so many factors that go into that.
Nice. Nice. All right. Well, folks, we're kind of right at the end here. Any last comments or questions real quick? I think that was... Go ahead, David.
Well, I didn't think anything else right now. I think you answered everything I had.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you feel free to ask questions online on Facebook as well. I have a website there, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay.
If you need Corey to come to your house for some PT, maybe not
Right.
you, David. That's a long trip for you.
I was going to say, do you come to Nampa or are you just in Boise?
I service Canyon County and Ada County.
There you go.
Yeah, because I'm actually looking for a physical therapist for my son. So,
Ooh,
yeah. I'll
nice.
reach
Well, there we
Nice. Nice.
Yep, I was just out in Nampa yesterday. I'm going to be in Nampa tomorrow.
Okay.
Excellent. Good deal. Well, Corey, thank you so much. So appreciative of your time. I know this is normally your scheduled time to work with patients and clients. So I really appreciate that you took this time out to talk to us. And thank you to everyone who came on and submitted questions. We really appreciate that. We'd like to address what you all are interested in. So I'm super happy that you guys showed up tonight. That's great.
Yeah, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, you guys, I'm turning off the recording. So you're going to be free and clear in just a sec.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good night, you all. We'll see
All right.
you
Bye-bye.
next time.
Thank you.
Bye.